History of English Literature, Romantic Age, 1798 to 1832, Part B, Episode 2, Short Questions with Answers. Question 8. How are Coleridge and Wordsworth different in their treatment of nature? Answer. Romantic poets are great poets of nature. Both Wordsworth and Coleridge are also great nature poets. Wordsworth took nature or natural objects as the subject matter of his poetry. Coleridge took supernatural things, objects, as the subject matter of his poetry. But in their treatment, Wordsworth spiritualized the natural and Coleridge naturalized the supernatural. Wordsworth in his poem describes the natural objects, but he feels that nature is not only beauty, it is also living. To Wordsworth, a flower is not important for its color, smell, or beauty, but it is important because there is a living spirit inside it. Wordsworth finds happiness in all objects of nature. Recollection of nature always makes him happy. On the other hand, Coleridge in his poem writes about supernatural things, but he presents supernatural to be natural. He writes about a dream, but the dream elements seem to be natural in his poem expression. For example, in the poem, the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, Coleridge describes nature in different ways. Before the mariner killed the bird, nature was kind and beautiful. He traveled to the south with favorable wind, but after killing the albatross, nature became cruel, hostile. He was punished in nature. Coleridge presents nature to be both kind and cruel. When he describes the supernatural things, readers are not afraid. He describes death, life in death, and phantomship. But the readers are not afraid of reading his description. Wordsworth gives us a philosophy of nature, that nature is the dwelling place of God. But Coleridge teaches a moral lesson that if we are kind to nature, nature is kind to us. Wordsworth can be called a philosopher of nature, and Coleridge can be called a poet of nature because he portrays nature in her diverse mood. Question 9. Briefly discuss Coleridge's idea of willing suspension of disbelief. Answer. The phrase was first used by Coleridge in Biographia Literaria, that willing suspension of disbelief for a moment, which contributes poetic faith. The term willing suspension of disbelief is introduced by S.T. Coleridge. The term is Coleridge's own interpretation of his poetry, and critics termed Coleridge as a poet of willing suspension of disbelief. Coleridge asserts that when readers go through either his narration of supernatural elements or dream, they willingly suspend themselves into believing whatever the poet relates. In other words, the readers take for granted Coleridge's unbelievable to be real. Nonetheless, we can say that although Coleridge uses supernatural and dream-like elements, he can naturalize them. In fact, Coleridge is gifted with narrative qualities. His narrative is so simple and sweeping that the readers take the unreal to be real, supernatural to be natural. For example, the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, when the old sailor describes his last journey to the south, where the Mary's guest is hypnotized and listens like a 3-year child. Likewise, the readers are mesmerized while reading Coleridge's poem. Coleridge can feed his readers with fantastic story. For he on honeydew hath fed, and drank the milk of paradise. In fact, Coleridge uses dreamlike elements or supernatural elements as a means to an end, and the end is to teach a moral. Man must learn to show love to all creations. In fact, Coleridge's poem can be enjoyed into one level: the simple, narrative, and complex philosophic. One may enjoy the fantastic description of Coleridge's poetry in addition to the allegorical meaning of the poem. So the reader willingly suspends himself into Coleridge's story, and this poetic of quality, willing suspension of disbelief is evident in all of Coleridge's poetry. Question 10. Why is Keats called a 19th century Greek poet? Keats is called a 19th century Greek poet because in all his poems he used Greek imageries. His poetry abounds with Greek mythological imageries. He refers to Greek mythology and looks upon Greek life and culture. He is impressed by Greek sense of beauty. Keats refers to Greek mythology to express sense of beauty and views of life. The Greek imageries he uses in his poems are sensuous. His ideas about life and beauty are tangible and earthy. In order to comment on the transitoriness of life, he refers to Greek art and sense of beauty, which can claim permanence over life. Therefore, Keats is called a 19th century Greek poet for his preoccupation with pagan elements or for his excessive use of Hellenic elements in his poems. A typical Greek sense is evident in almost all his poems. We can refer to the following lines in order to understand Keats' preoccupation with Greek. My heart aches and a drowsy numbness pains my sins as dew of hemlock I had drunk up emptied some dull opiate to the drains. 1 minute passed and lithe words had sunk. Listening the beautiful song of nightingale, the poet feels as if he has drunk hemlock and has gone to lithe words. His use of the Greek mythological imageries expresses his sense of beauty and transitoriness of human life. Question 11. What pagan elements or Greek elements do you find in Keats' poetry? Or write a short note on Keats' Hellenism. Keats is famous as a poet of sensuous beauty. His love for beauty is external. His color, the smell, the beauty that he describes appeal to 5 human senses. He is a passionate lover of beauty. He adores beauty, and his adoration is pageant in nature. He worships beauty as goddess. Keats escapes the world of reality and takes shelter into the world of beauty and imagination. There is an emotional self of Keats when he describes beauty. He becomes a part of a beautiful object that he describes. Keats excessively uses Greek imageries or pagan elements in his poetry. He looked upon Greek culture as the ideal of beauty. All of his poems are based on Greek mythology. He describes Greek life in order to express his sense of beauty and his sensuousness. Greek imageries conveys Keats' idea of beauty, which is always sensuous. For example, in the poem Ode to Nightingale, he expresses his sense of beauty by using hemlock, wine, opium, lethe. His feeling is sensuous and melancholy, just like the feeling of wine. Keats also uses Greek elements to show contrast between life and art. The beauty of art is permanent, but the beauty of life and nature is transient. Therefore, Keats' use of Hellenic life has a purpose. Question 12. Discuss Keats' feeling on reading Chapman's Homer. Answer. Keats has wide experience of reading poetry. When he became familiar with Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, he became surprised by its wisdom and beauty. Reading Chapman's Homer was a kind of discovery for him. He felt like discoverer who discover planet in the sky, or like Cortez who discovered Pacific Ocean from Darien Mountain. Keats in his sonnet experiences this feeling of reading Chapman's translation of Homer. The effect of poetry on Keats is expressed in this sonnet. In the beginning of the poem, Keats says that he has traveled many realms of gold. He considers the world of poetry as a realm of gold. He has also traveled many goodly states and kingdoms. He has learned the manner, behavior, customs, politics, and nothing is comparable to the world of Homer. In Chapman's Homer, he discovers a world of wonder. To convey his feeling of discovery, he uses two similes, like watcher of the sky and like stout Cortez. These two similes beautifully and aptly express Keats' admiration of Homer. Keats writes his poem in the style of Petrarchan sonnet. In the octave, he expresses his experience of reading poetry and his feeling of Chapman Homer. In the sestet, he expresses his feeling using two similes. However, in his excitement, Keats replaced the name of Cortez for Balboa. Keats read about Cortez who conquered Mexico and Balboa's discovery of Pacific. Keats changes the historical facts in order to express his poetic feeling. In poetry, he took for the truth in human nature rather than historical truths. In fact, both should go together. Question 13. Write a note on Keats' Hyperion. Hyperion is a long narrative poem or epic by John Keats. It is divided into 3 books. Keats writes Hyperion in the style of Milton's Paradise Lost. Keats describes the fallen Titan who were overthrown by the Olympians. The Titans were the older generation of gods and goddesses, and Olympians were the younger generation of gods and goddesses. Hyperion was the leader of the Titans, and Zeus was the leader of the Olympians. In the war between the two generations, Hyperion and his followers were defeated. After their fall, they make a debate to analyze the reason for their downfall. In the debate, different speakers point out different reasons. Some say it is the law of nature that the power will go to the young and new. But Keats in his poem points out the fundamental reason for their downfall. According to him, the Olympians are greater in beauty. The Titans are old, vulgar, and weak. But the Olympians excel them in beauty. Therefore, he says, first in beauty shall be first in might. Keats' philosophy of beauty is expressed in his epic Hyperion. Therefore, Hyperion expresses Keats' theory of beauty that first in beauty shall be first in might. Keats is a worshipper of beauty. In all his odes, he expresses the same idea as he expressed in his Hyperion. Question 14. Briefly illustrate Keats' negative capability in his poetry. Answer. Negative capability implies that the poet has no individuality of his own. He became one with the thing that he describes. Keats is the most sensuous artist of romantic poetry. In Keats, we notice a complete imaginative and emotional identity with a cult of sensuous beauty. One may say that Keats completely loses himself into a thing of beauty and completeness, contemplates. This is known as Keats' negative capability. In other words, Keats escapes into the world of imagination to get relief from the haunting realities of life. Such typical Keatsian situation is evident in almost all his poems and in the poems Ode to Nightingale. And that illustrates Keats' negative capability in particular. My heart aches and a drowsy numbness pains my sense, as though of hemlock I have drunk, or emptied some dull opiate to the drains. 1 minute passed and little words had sank. Here we see that after hearing the beautiful song of Nightingale, Keats completely loses himself into the song. It seems that he had drunk the water of the river of forgetfulness and forgot his own world, which is fraught with sorrows and sufferings. In critical language, what imagination sizes as beauty must be true is known as Keats' negative capability. In Ode on a Grecian urn, Keats is so interrupted by beauty that he sees with reverence. He sees with reverence and says, "Beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all you know on earth and all you need to know." Keats was all-begotten. He had seen the realities of life and suffered the agonies of life without trying to understand their causes and reasons. This is also known as Keats' negative capability. Shakespeare is also said to have possessed this quality, but both Shakespeare and Keats are melancholic. Question 15. Why is Charles Lamb called the Prince of English Essayists? Answer. Charles Lamb is called the Prince of English Essayists because the chief quality of his work is sweetness of nature, which he communicates in his essay. He remained a bachelor, but he describes with sympathy the happiness of wife and children. His essays Dream Children bears testimony to this feeling of love and sympathy. Even the sad incidents of his life could not affect him. He was also unaffected by French and Industrial Revolution. He was unmoved by Romantic movement. He remained gay and humorous, facing a suffering of life. Although he did not participate in the Romantic movement, he was a child of English Romanticism. He possesses poetic imagination and added strangeness to his description of beauty. Like Romantic world, he created a world of wonder and sensibility. His essays are also autobiographical. He is a painter of old faces, places, and things. He combined humor and pathos together. His essays are lyrical or prose like Wordsworth, Shelley, Keats. He also represents the romantic spirit in his essays. In other words, his essays provide the finest example of romantic spirit of prose. Thank you, viewers.